Newell stared at the massive holographic display in the Galactic Military Academy's main hall. His human eyes focused on the flashing red text that read the impossible scenario. 300 years undefeated. Around him, alien students from across the galaxy whispered and pointed at him and his two fellow human classmates. Look at the Deathworlders, one crystalline being said to another. They actually think they can beat it. Jai-Yun, the team's technology expert, stood to Newell's left. She kept her face calm, but her fingers tightened into fists. On his right, Tai-Wan crossed his arms and smiled. All three humans had learned to deal with the constant mockery of the Academy. Commander Valthor, a tall blue-skinned alien with 4 arms, walked to the front of the hall. His upper arms were crossed behind his back, while his lower arms held a datapad. "Another year, another chance for failure," he announced. His voice carried through the hall. "The impossible scenario stands unbeaten for 3 centuries. Which brave students wish to embarrass themselves this time?" The hall fell silent. Every year, the best students tried to beat the simulation. Every year, they failed. Some lasted minutes, others just seconds. None had ever reached even the halfway point. Newell stepped forward. "We volunteer, Commander." The silence broke into laughter. Even Commander Valthor's professional mask cracked as he chuckled. "The humans, the Deathworlders want to try." He looked down at his datapad. "Ah yes, Cadet Newell, Cadet Jai-Yun, and Cadet Tai-Wan. Our special cases." Jai-Yun stepped up beside Newell. "Yes, sir. We request permission to attempt the simulation." "And what makes you think you can succeed where thousands of the galaxy's finest have failed?" Valthor asked. His tone made it clear he expected no real answer. Tai-Wan joined his teammates. "Because we see things differently, sir. We come from Earth, a world you call a death world. Where you see impossible odds, we see challenges to overcome." The commander's amusement faded. "Very well. You have 1 week to prepare. The simulation will test your combat skills, strategic thinking, and leadership abilities. I hope you're ready to join the long list of failures." As the crowd dispersed, a quiet voice caught their attention. "An interesting choice." They turned to see Professor Du-Yun, one of the few other humans at the Academy. The elderly instructor taught xenobiology and was known for his unusual ideas. "Professor," Newell bowed slightly. "Do you think we're making a mistake?" Du-Yun smiled. "That depends. Are you doing this to prove something to them, or to yourselves?" "Both," Jai-Yun admitted. "We're tired of being seen as primitive Deathworlders, but we also believe we can beat it." The professor nodded. "Then you might want to look at the simulation's history, not the attempts to beat it. Everyone studies those. Look at why it was created. Sometimes the path to victory lies in understanding the past." He walked away, leaving the 3 cadets with their thoughts. They looked at each other, then back at the holographic display. "We should split up," Newell said. "Jai-Yun, check the technical specifications. Look for patterns in the system itself. Tai-Wan, study the combat records of previous attempts. I'll research the simulation's history, like Professor Du-Yun suggested." They nodded and separated, each heading to different parts of the Academy's library. As Newell walked, he heard more whispers and saw more pointing fingers. But for the first time, he smiled. Let them laugh. Let them mock. In 1 week, they would show the galaxy what humans could do. The challenge was set. The pieces were in motion, and 3 humans from Earth were about to shake the foundations of the Galactic Military Academy. The Academy's library was quiet as Jai-Yun studied the technical records on her datapad. Her eyes widened as she noticed something unusual in the simulation's code structure. After 3 days of research, this was their first real breakthrough. She quickly sent messages to Newell and Tai-Wan. "Meet me in study room 7. Found something important." 20 minutes later, the 3 humans gathered around a holographic display. Jai-Yun pulled up her findings. "Look at this. Every species that tried to beat the simulation used standard combat formations. The Arcturians used crystal shield walls. The Centaurians tried their famous three-point attack. Everyone used what they knew best. And they all failed, Tai-1 said, leaning forward to study the data. But what makes this important? Hamnul, who had spent days reading about the simulation's history, spoke up. Because the simulation was created after the Great Hive War, 300 years ago, the galaxy almost fell to an enemy that fought like nothing they'd seen before. Jayun nodded. Exactly. And here's what everyone missed. She zoomed in on a section of code. The simulation allows for environmental changes. We can alter the battlefield itself. No one ever tried this because their homeworlds were all stable, safe planets. But Earth, Ta-1 started to smile. Earth taught us to adapt. Hamnul finished. Earthquakes, storms, volcanoes. Our planet never let us get comfortable. They spent the next hour sharing their research. Tai-1 had studied the combat records of every failed attempt. He noticed that most species gave up after their first strategy failed. None tried to change their approach during the battle. It's like they're all playing the same game with different pieces, he explained. But we don't have to play their game. On Earth, we learned to change our tactics when things went wrong. Hamnul pulled up his own research. The simulation was designed by Admiral Venra. He led the forces that finally defeated the Hive. His personal logs mention that the enemy's greatest strength was unpredictability. They would retreat when expected to attack when expected to defend. Just like guerrilla warfare on Earth, Jayun said, hit and run. Use the environment. Never fight on the enemy's terms. They worked through the night, building their strategy. Jayun wrote new programs to analyze the simulation's environmental controls. Tai-1 designed combat maneuvers that would seem chaotic to alien eyes, but made perfect sense to humans used to adapting on the fly. As morning approached, Professor Du-Yun found them still working. He brought them hot drinks from Earth, a rare luxury at the Academy. I see you're taking a different approach, he said, looking at their plans. Yes, sir, Hamnul answered. We're not trying to beat the simulation with pure strength or standard tactics. We're going to change how the game is played. Du-Yun smiled. Good. Very good. But remember, the greatest victories often come from understanding not just how to fight, but when not to fight. The professor's words stuck with them as they refined their plan. They weren't just preparing to show their combat skills. They were preparing to show the galaxy a new way of thinking. The next day, Commander Valthor passed by their study room. He saw the complex diagrams and battle plans on their screens. For a moment, doubt crossed his face, but he quickly dismissed it. After all, how could 3 humans from a primitive death world possibly succeed where the galaxy's finest had failed? He would learn soon enough. The simulation was 3 days away, and the human cadets were about to prove that being from a death world wasn't a weakness. It was their greatest strength. The simulation chamber was a large white room with smooth walls that could transform into any environment. Hamnul, Jayun, and Ta-1 stood in the center, wearing the Academy's standard combat suits. The viewing gallery above was packed with students and instructors eager to watch the humans fail. Commander Valthor's voice came through the speakers. Simulation begins in 30 seconds. Prepare yourselves. Remember the plan. Hamnul said quietly to his teammates. We're not here to win yet. We're here to learn. The white walls shimmered and changed. The humans found themselves in a vast battlefield. Ahead of them lay a fortified position with multiple defense layers. Behind those defenses waited an army of holographic enemies, their weapons ready. Begin, Valthor announced. Instead of charging forward like previous teams had done, the humans split up. Jayun moved to a hidden position and activated her technical interface. Tai-1 circled to the right, using small hills for cover. Hamnul advanced slowly, studying the enemy's reactions. In the viewing gallery, confused whispers spread. This was not how the simulation was supposed to be attempted. Teams always attack together, trying to break through with coordinated force. The first wave of enemy fire came. But the humans weren't where they were supposed to be. Jai Yun had already located the environmental controls. With a few commands, she created a dust storm on the left flank. The enemy's sensors struggled to adapt. Interesting choice, Professor Du Yun murmured from his position in the gallery. They're fighting the simulation itself, not just the enemies within it. Taiwan used the confusion to penetrate the first defense line. He didn't try to hold his position. Instead, he destroyed key sensor nodes and retreated before the enemy could respond. The defensive line's coordination began to break down. Hamnul pushed forward next, using the gaps Taiwan had created. He got further than any previous team had in the first 5 minutes. The gallery grew quiet as the observers realized something was different about this attempt. But then the simulation adapted. New enemy units appeared behind the humans. The battlefield itself began to change, revealing hidden weapons. What had seemed like a promising start quickly turned into a desperate situation. Pull back, Hainul ordered. Jai Yun and Taiwan immediately retreated to predetermined positions. Instead of fighting to the last like most teams did, they performed a coordinated withdrawal. The simulation ended. They had failed, but differently from all previous failures. Commander Valfor's voice held a mix of surprise and dismissal. 17 minutes, 23 seconds. Not even close to completing the scenario, but longer than most attempts. The three humans stood straight as the room returned to its white state. They weren't celebrating. Instead, they were all thinking, analyzing, planning. Your tactics were unusual, Valfor said as he entered the chamber, but ultimately futile. Perhaps now you understand why this simulation remains unbeaten. No, sir, Hainul replied respectfully. Now we understand how to beat it. Valfor laughed. Your human confidence is amusing. What makes you think you learned anything from this failure? Because, Jai Yun said, her eyes on her datapad, we now know how the simulation adapts. We know its patterns, its responses, the way it thinks. And next time, Taiwan added, we'll be ready for it. As they left the chamber, other students moved aside. The mockery was still there, but now it held a trace of uncertainty. They had seen something new today, something unexpected. Professor Du Yun met them in the corridor. Well done, he said simply. But we failed, Hainul pointed out. Did you? The professor smiled. Sometimes, the best way to learn how to win is to lose in the right way. The humans headed back to their study room. They had work to do. The simulation had shown them its secrets, and now they knew exactly how to proceed. Their next attempt would be very different indeed. In the Academy's historical archives, Hainul discovered something significant. He sat surrounded by old data crystals and ancient texts, his eyes fixed on a particular passage about the Great Hive War. The information made him understand why the simulation had remained unbeaten for so long. He called an urgent meeting with his teammates. They gathered in their usual study room, where Jai Yun had covered the walls with technical diagrams, and Taiwan had mapped out various combat scenarios. The simulation isn't just a training exercise, Hainul explained to his teammates. It's based on the final battle of the Great Hive War. The enemy we face in the simulation is fighting exactly like the Hive did 3 centuries ago. Jai Yun looked up from her datapad. That explains the unusual attack patterns I observed. The enemy doesn't fight like any current military force in the galaxy. Exactly, Hainul continued. The Hive was different. They were aggressive, adaptable, and they used the environment as a weapon. They were so effective that the galaxy nearly lost the war. Taiwan moved to the central display and pulled up their combat data from the first attempt. They fought like predators, he said, like the creatures we evolved alongside on Earth. The realization struck them all at once. The simulation wasn't impossible. It was just impossible for species that evolved on safe, peaceful worlds. But humans came from Earth, where every day was a battle for survival. Professor Du Yun entered the room quietly, carrying more historical records. "I see you found the truth," he said. "The Hive fought like the predators of Earth. They adapted, they hunted, they used every advantage. The galaxy had never faced anything like them. And that's why we can beat this simulation," Jai Yun said. "We understand this type of warfare because it's in our history, in our instincts. Earth taught us these lessons over millions of years." The professor nodded. "The peaceful species of the galaxy forgot how to fight this way. They developed sophisticated weapons and tactics, but they lost touch with their primitive survival instincts. Humans never had that luxury on Earth." Hanul studied the historical battle records more closely. The Hive would retreat when they appeared strongest, attack when they seemed weakest. They used storms, earthquakes, and solar flares as weapons. They fought like predators. Just like early humans hunting on the savannas of Earth, Taiwan added, "We didn't have claws or powerful jaws. We had to use our minds, the environment, and endurance to survive." They spent hours analyzing the similarities between Hive warfare and Earth's natural challenges. Every tactic the simulation used had a parallel in Earth's history. The sudden ambushes were like leopard attacks. The coordinated assaults resembled wolf pack hunting strategies. The use of terrain matched how Earth's apex predators controlled their territories. As night fell, Commander Valthor passed by their study room again. He saw them surrounded by historical records rather than combat manuals. "Studying ancient history won't help you be a modern combat simulation," he said dismissively. The humans exchanged knowing looks but said nothing. They understood something that the commander didn't. The simulation wasn't testing modern combat skills. It was testing ancient survival instincts that most species had lost. "Tomorrow," Hanul said after the commander left, "we start designing new strategies, not as military cadets, but as children of Earth, a world that taught us how to survive against impossible odds." Their path to victory was becoming clear. They would beat the simulation not by fighting against it, but by fighting like it. The galaxy was about to learn why humans from Earth were called Deathworlders, and why that was not a weakness, but their greatest strength. Jai Yun sat alone in the simulation control room, her fingers moving quickly across multiple screens. She had received special permission to study the simulation's technical systems, though many instructors thought it was a waste of time. As she examined the environmental controls, she found something that made her smile. She immediately called Hanul and Tadwan. "The simulation isn't just a combat program," she explained when they arrived. "It's a complete environment simulator. We can change everything: gravity, temperature, weather, terrain. Previous teams only saw it as a backdrop for fighting." Hanul looked at the complex display of environmental controls. "Like Earth's changing seasons and climates," he said, "we can make the battlefield itself fight for us." Taiwan studied the data. Every other species treated the environment as an obstacle. They never thought to use it as a weapon. They began to design a new strategy. Instead of fighting the simulation directly, they would change the rules of engagement. Jai Yun programmed a series of environmental shifts that would match Earth's most challenging conditions. Professor Du Yun watched from the doorway. "Interesting approach," he said. "You're not just fighting in the environment. You're fighting with it. On Earth, we learned to use everything available," Hanul explained. "When early humans hunted larger predators, they used terrain, weather, and timing to their advantage. They worked through the night, creating a battle plan unlike anything the Academy had seen. Jai Yun programmed sudden gravity changes that would disorient the enemy but feel familiar to humans from Earth. Taiwan designed combat maneuvers that used these changes to their advantage. We'll start with heavy gravity, Jai Yun explained, showing her calculations. Most species will struggle, but we're used to Earth's stronger pull. Then we'll switch to low gravity when they adapt. Hanul added his tactical insights, and we'll combine it with terrain changes. Mountains becoming valleys, solid ground turning to swamps, like Earth's ever-changing landscapes. The next morning, Commander Valthor inspected their work. He saw complex environmental programs instead of traditional battle plans. "This is not how military exercises are conducted," he said firmly. "No, sir," Jai-Yun replied respectfully. "This is how survival on Earth works. We adapt to our environment, and we make the environment work for us." Valthor shook his head and left, but Professor Du-Yun stayed. "You've found something that everyone else missed," he said. "The simulation doesn't just test combat skills. It tests adaptation." They spent the next days refining their strategy. Jai-Yun perfected the environmental controls. Tai-Wan practiced fighting in changing conditions. Hae-Newell coordinated their efforts, creating a plan that would use every advantage. Other students began to watch them with growing interest. They saw the humans training in rapidly changing environments, adapting to conditions that would cripple most species. Some started to wonder if these Deathworlders might actually succeed. "Tomorrow we make our second attempt," Hae-Newell announced to his team. "We won't fight the simulation on its terms. We'll fight it on Earth's terms." As they made their final preparations, even the skeptical instructors noticed something different about these human cadets. They moved with confidence, but not arrogance. They had discovered something that centuries of galactic civilization had forgotten: the power of adaptation. The simulation was about to face something it had never encountered before: warriors who didn't just survive in harsh conditions, but thrived in them. The children of Earth were ready to show the galaxy what Deathworlders could really do. Word spread through the academy about the unusual methods of the human cadets. Most students still doubted them, but a few saw potential in their approach. Among these was young Mai, a brilliant engineering student who had always felt different from her classmates. Young Mai found the humans in their study room, surrounded by technical displays and battle plans. "Your environmental manipulation strategy is fascinating," she said. "But have you considered the power systems? Each change requires significant energy." Jai-Yun looked up from her work, interested. "We've been focusing on what changes to make, not how to power them efficiently." "I can help with that," young Mai offered. "I've studied the Academy's power grid. There are ways to optimize the energy flow." Hae-Newell welcomed her input. As they talked, another visitor arrived. Sang-Ho, a quiet xenobiology expert, stood in the doorway. "The hive's biological patterns," he said softly. "I've been studying them for years. They match Earth's predator behaviors." The humans shared a look. Their small team was growing. These outsiders brought new perspectives they hadn't considered. Young Mai examined their environmental control systems. "If we modify the power distribution," she explained, "we can create more dramatic changes using less energy. The simulation won't expect that." Sang-Ho added his insights about predator tactics. The hive used hunting patterns similar to Earth's pack hunters. They would test defenses, retreat, then strike at weak points, just like wolves. Professor Du-Yun watched this collaboration with approval. "The strongest teams," he said, "are often built by those who know what it means to be different." The expanded group worked together, combining their different skills. Young Mi improved their environmental controls, making them more efficient and powerful. Sang-Ho helped refine their tactical approach, using his knowledge of predator behavior patterns. Commander Valthor noticed these gatherings with concern. "This is highly irregular," he told Professor Du-Yun. "They're turning a combat simulation into some kind of science experiment." "They're approaching it with fresh eyes," Du-Yun replied. "Sometimes the best solutions come from unexpected places." The team worked late into the night. Young Mi's engineering skills helped them create environmental changes that used minimal power but had maximum impact. Sang-Ho's biological insights helped them predict and counter the simulation's responses. "It's not just about beating the simulation," Hae-Newell explained to their new allies. "It's about showing that different perspectives have value. That being from a challenging world or thinking differently isn't a weakness." Tai-Wan practiced their new combined strategies. Jai-Yun integrated Young Mi's power modifications into her control systems. The group moved with growing confidence, each member contributing their unique skills. As they prepared for their next attempt, other students began to watch them with new interest. The mockery had largely stopped. Now there was curiosity. These outsiders were doing something new, something different. Tomorrow, Newell told his expanded team, we show them what we can achieve together. Not just as humans, but as a group that sees strength in our differences. They stood together, a small but determined band of outsiders. Young Mai with her engineering brilliance, Sang-ho with his deep understanding of biological patterns, and the three humans with their Deathworld experience. They were ready to challenge not just the simulation, but the entire Academy's way of thinking. The simulation chamber was silent as the team made their final preparations. Newell, Jae-yun, and Tai-won checked their combat suits, while Young Mai monitored the power systems, and Sang-ho reviewed their tactical displays. The viewing gallery above was packed with students and instructors, all eager to see this unusual attempt. Commander Valfor's voice came through the speakers. This is your final permitted attempt. Are you ready to fail again? We're ready to begin, sir, Newell responded professionally. The white walls of the chamber started to shimmer. The battlefield appeared, but this time the humans had a plan. Jae-yun, with Young Mai's power modifications, immediately began changing the environment. The gravity increased to Earth normal levels, causing many in the viewing gallery to gasp. Most species found such gravity crushing, but the humans moved freely. First phase initiated, Jae-yun reported. The ground began to shift, creating unstable terrain. The simulation's forces struggled to maintain their positions. Tai-won moved forward, using Sang-ho's predator-based tactics. He didn't attack directly but tested the enemy's defenses, retreating when they responded. The simulation's forces followed their programming, advancing to pursue him. They're taking the bait, Sang-ho said through the communication system, just like a pack predator chasing prey into a trap. Newell waited until the enemy forces were committed to their advance. Then he gave the signal. Now, Jae-yun. The battlefield transformed. What had been solid ground became unstable. The gravity shifted suddenly to low Earth levels. The enemy forces, adapted to the heavy gravity, suddenly found themselves too light, their movements uncontrolled. In the viewing gallery, Professor Du-yun smiled as he watched the humans execute their plan. The other instructors leaned forward, realizing they were seeing something unprecedented. Young Mai's voice came through the system. Power consumption optimal. We can maintain these changes indefinitely. The humans moved with perfect coordination, using the environmental changes to their advantage. When the simulation adapted to one condition, they switched to another. Each change was powered by Young Mai's efficient systems, guided by Sang-ho's tactical insights. Commander Valfor watched in growing disbelief as the team progressed further than any previous attempt. This is not standard military doctrine, he protested. No, Professor Du-yun replied. This is survival doctrine. This is how life on Earth works. The simulation threw everything it had at them. New enemy units appeared, defensive systems activated, but the team was ready. They had studied the hive's patterns, understood their predatory nature, and knew how to counter it. Hours passed. The viewing gallery remained full, no one willing to leave as the humans pushed deeper into the simulation than ever before. They weren't just fighting, they were transforming the battlefield itself into their ally. Final phase, Newell announced. The team gathered for their last push. They had reached the point where all other attempts had failed, but they weren't stopping. The simulation's core defenses activated, presenting what had always been an impossible challenge. But the humans and their allies had changed the rules of engagement. They weren't fighting on the simulation's terms anymore. They were fighting on Earth's terms, and they were about to make history. The simulation chamber fell silent as the final enemy defenses collapsed. For a moment, no one moved or spoke. Then the status display flashed green, and words appeared that had never been seen before. Simulation complete. Victorii, HFY. Commander Valthor stood motionless in the control room, his four hands gripping the console. The impossible had happened. After 3 centuries, the unbeatable simulation had been conquered. The human team stood in the chamber, tired but proud. He Newell, Jai Yun, and Taiwan exchanged quiet smiles, while Young Mei checked the final power readings and Sang-ho reviewed their tactical data. Professor Du Yun was the first to speak. In 300 years, no one thought to question why the simulation was unbeatable. No one except a group of outsiders who saw things differently. The viewing gallery erupted in excitement. Students and instructors talked rapidly, trying to understand what they had just witnessed. The humans had not just beaten the simulation, they had revolutionized how it could be approached. Commander Valthor entered the chamber, his expression complex. "Your methods were unconventional," he said slowly. "You didn't follow any standard military doctrine." "No, sir," He Newell replied respectfully. "We followed Earth's doctrine. Adapt, survive, overcome." The commander nodded. "The Academy has much to learn from this. Perhaps we have been too rigid in our thinking." News of their victory spread quickly through the Academy. Students who had once mocked the Deathworlders now approached them with questions. How had they thought of using environmental controls? What made them consider predator tactics? How had they seen possibilities that others missed? In the days that followed, the Academy began to change. New courses were added, studying Earth's survival strategies and adaptation techniques. The term Deathworlder was no longer used as an insult but spoken with respect. Young Mi's power management systems became a standard part of engineering studies. Sang-ho's insights into biological patterns were incorporated into tactical training. The humans' approach to environmental adaptation became required learning for all combat students. Professor Du Yun gathered the team in their study room one last time. "You've done more than beat a simulation," he told them. "You've shown that different perspectives have value, that what some see as weaknesses can be strengths." The Academy's leadership formally recognized their achievement. Their names were added to the Hall of Honor, the first entry in 3 centuries. But more importantly, their victory opened minds throughout the galaxy. "We didn't just win for ourselves," He Newell told his team as they celebrated quietly. "We won for everyone who's ever been told they're too different, too primitive, too unusual to succeed." Jai Yun looked at the technical displays that had helped them achieve victory. "We showed them that being from a challenging world doesn't make you weaker, it makes you stronger." Taiwan smiled. "And we showed them that the best solutions often come from unexpected places." As the team looked out at the Academy grounds, they saw students from different species working together, sharing ideas, thinking in new ways. Their victory had done more than break a record. It had broken down barriers. The galaxy was changing, becoming more open to different ways of thinking. And it all started because 3 humans from Earth refused to accept that anything was truly unbeatable. They had shown the galaxy that sometimes the harshest worlds produce the strongest warriors, and that true strength comes not from power, but from the ability to adapt and overcome.